Hello and welcome, basketball lovers and hoop heads, to a solo episode of the Checkup Basketball Podcast. I'm doing this by myself without my good brother Shaler because unfortunately we could not align our schedules this week. That sucks. I wish we could, but sometimes things don't work out in your favor. And so we are here. You are stuck with me. I am so sorry. I apologize. This is the first solo pod I've ever done, so I hope it is not boring and awful, although it probably will be, and I will sound like I'm rambling a lot because I don't have anyone to tell me to shut the fuck up. But, alas, I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to do this. We're going to get through this. I really just want to talk about what me and Shayla were going to talk about in our normal episode because I have to get it off my chest. It's been sitting on my chest all week, and it's quite heavy. And I want to get it off of there. I want to talk to you guys what I was going to talk about in our regular podcast. And I will probably make this a YouTube video of some sort. Probably an upload for this Friday. So the day after this podcast comes out, there will be a YouTube upload that is basically just this topic. But still, I want to talk to you in podcast form, because I want to give you content, and I love providing content. So without further ado, let's jump into it, right? So my idea that I wanted to cover this week on the podcast was breaking down who are the true contenders for the championship in this very NBA season. The reason I wanted to do that was because the Spurs beat the Thunder this weekend to make it on their way to the NBA Cup. It was very sad. I was very mad. It was upsetting, deeply so. But after the Spurs beat the Thunder, there was much conversation about, well, are the Spurs contenders? Are they teamly underrated? Should we be fearful of them moving forward? And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, maybe we should. Maybe we should be fearful of the Spurs. But is there a way we can quantify what should be a contender and what teams are not contenders at all? And I can't claim this as a completely original idea. The NBA Daily Show with the Athletic. So the Athletic, which is under the New York Times, they have a podcast called the NBA Daily Show. And every Saturday, they have a show called the NBA Slam and Jam. This is with Andrew Schlecht and Alex Spears, who are veterans of the Down to Dunk podcast that I have been listening to for over 10 years. I love those boys. Those fellas on the Slam and Jam show, Alex Spears himself has basically come up with a model or some statistical ways of classifying who is true contenders and who is not. He did this by finding what past NBA champions have in common statistically in the regular season and how can we apply that to the NBA. I'm doing my own version of that. This is going to be a dynamic model that changes throughout the season. I'm going to add and subtract things from it. And hopefully I get to a point where I can aptly credit the NBA teams in the regular season who we should recognize as genuine A1, Tier 1 NBA contenders. And hopefully we can parse out who we think should actually win the championship. That's my goal, is at the end of the season to make a model that can properly filter who should be recognized as NBA champions. I hope that makes sense. I think it does. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to start walking through the very rudimentary base version of this quote-unquote model that I have created. I have picked out 4 statistics that I think are important to classifying a champion. These are very base, rudimentary statistics. So this is not finished. This is not definitive. This is just what I have at first. This will change. But the 4 statistics I have selected are offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating, and winning percentage. Again, very basic. How good is your offense? How good is your defense? How much do you beat teams by? And how many games do you win? That's what I've picked to base this initial kind of model off of. And hopefully I will change this as the season goes along. Obviously, as things stand today, we're about 25 games in. The way I have quantified and classified teams will change as the season goes along. Teams will either move up and down in the tiers. I have 4 tiers, at the end of this. And teams will move in and out of these tiers because these analytics are going to change as the season goes along. But that's besides the point. Let's go ahead and break down the things that I have found. I picked the last 15 NBA champions. I really wanted to just pick the last 10 because I think, the last 10, that's around the time that we had the 3-point revolution in the NBA with the Warriors. And that's when I think we've really entered the quote-unquote modern NBA. But I included all the way back to the 09-010 season when the Lakers won the championship because. Last 15 years is a nice roundish number for me to pick, and I think it gives us some interesting teams to include within our statistics. But without further ado, let's go ahead and break down what I've found over the past 15 champions. What do they have in common? And then how do we apply that to the NBA today? I'm going to do that now, okay? So let's start with offensive rating. The last 15 years worth of champions have an average offensive rating of 6th in the NBA in the regular season, but they have a median offensive rating of 5th. Now, it's important if you're comfortable with any sort of statistics or ratings, math in general, there's a difference between average and median. Average is obviously you add up every number in your data pool and then you divide by the different number of numbers, for lack of a better word. So we divided the total of offensive ratings by 15, for example, in this. But median is picking the middle number. And the reason to me that median is a more useful statistic to use in this scenario is because a median shows you the middle, the exact middle. An average can be weighted on either the low or the high end by outlier numbers, right? So if you have a bunch of averages of like 4, 5, 6, 5th best offense, and then you have one average of like 12 or 14 or the 15th best offense, that 15th best offense is going to throw your average off. It's going to change it. It's going to affect it pretty heavily. But if we looked at the median offense, say in that scenario, it's still going to show us that normally about the 5th best offense wins. This number is an outlier. The 16th best offense winning a championship is an outlier, and that's not normal, and maybe we should disregard teams with the 16th best offense. I hope that makes sense as I've explained it. So I value median more than average, especially in this scenario. So again, my median offensive rating on the last 15 champions is 5, and the average is 6th. So not too big of a change there. The worst offense to win a championship over the past 15 years, I believe, was the 2009-2010 Lakers, with Powell and Kobe. They had the 17th ranked offense in the regular season. So history shows us that you almost absolutely have to have a top half of the league offense in order to win a championship. And normally those offenses are around top 5. So, important to note moving forward. Let's go to defensive rating. Very similar numbers. The average defensive rating amongst the last 15 champions was 6th, yet again. But the median was 4, the 4th best defense. So, this tells us over the past 15 years that having a better defense in the regular season is perhaps slightly more valuable than having a good offense. Again, something interesting to leave in the back of your mind. But the lowest rated defense to win a championship over the last 15 years was the 2023 Nuggets. They had the 16th best defensive rating in the regular season that year. I think this is particularly interesting to note because that Nuggets team in the playoffs that year, the best offense that they played in the playoffs was the 14th ranked offense in the regular season, and that was the Suns in the second round. In 2023, the Nuggets, I think they played the Timberwolves in the first round. They played the Suns in the second round. They played the Lakers in the conference finals. And then, of course, they played the Heat in the finals. All of those teams had basically below league average offenses. Not saying that you can't win a championship with a bottom half of the league offense, because obviously they did, but it required a very specific scenario to happen in order for them to win a championship with a defense that bad. So me personally, I weight defense very, very heavily in my champion evaluation. But again, that's not part of this. Let's move on to net rating. This was the most enlightening one to me. So over the past 15 years, the lowest ranking team, or the lowest net rating ranking team to win the championship was 8th. No team over the last 15 years below 8th in the NBA in net rating has won the championship. That's much different from offense and defense that we've looked at so far. And the average ranking and the median ranking for net rating, teams that win the championship was third. So does not happen very often that a team outside of the top 3 in net rating actually wins a championship. That is very, very, very interesting to note to me, and something that I'm going to weight very heavily moving forward. So far, out of the 3 things we've talked about, offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating and defensive rating seem to matter the most to me. And I bet if I went to defensive rating and I moved that 2023 Nuggets team, the defensive rating necessary to win a championship is going to be even higher, probably closer to top 3 in the league. So it seems like to me, from what I've done so far, you need to have a top 3 net rating and almost a top 3 defense in order to be favorites for the championship. It's very interesting. But let's move on to the last statistic I looked at, which was winning percentage. Obviously, that's the amount of games you win out of 82. The lowest win percentage rating over the last 15 years was 64% of the games won. And if I look at that real quick right now, 64% of 82 is 52 games. So, in order to win the championship, you got to win 52 games, is what this is telling me. You got to win 52. It's not a crazy amount, but it is a decent amount. Very interesting to note. But the average rating amongst champions was 72.5%, or, around 73%, which that is closer to 60 games won. Now, obviously, this one is kind of thrown around. The median amongst championship winners was 70 as well. So that's 58 games. So more often than not, teams that win the championship are winning 58 to 60 games in the regular season. That's a lot. And this isn't even the 15-16 Warriors, which won 73 games, isn't even included in this statistic. So that's kind of crazy to me. that was another very enlightening one, because I think there's a lot of teams that could win around 48 to 52 games that we could talk into as like, oh yeah, they could probably win the championship. They may be, but history shows us that is wildly, wildly unlikely. So that's all of this is very interesting to me. I hope you've stuck with me. Out of these 4 statistics, again, like I said, the 2 most interesting to me were net rating and defensive rating. So those are things moving forward I'll probably value in my model as I continue to develop this. Another thing that I looked at was turnover percentage. I thought turnover percentage might tell us a lot about, like, if you can win the possession game in the NBA, that oftentimes just means you win the basketball game. So I was like, teams that don't turn the ball over a lot probably win the championship a lot. But that was actually not the case. Teams that won the championship were all over the place as far as turnover percentage goes. So that didn't tell me as much as I would like. But moving forward, I can't wait to develop this a little more and look at what more champions have done. What do they have in common? What can I add to this list? What can I detract from it in order to solidify what makes a champion? So let's quickly go through the tiers of teams in the NBA this season that meet some of these requirements that previous champions have had. So what I did was I divided teams in this current NBA into 4 tiers. And the 4 tiers are very simple. Tier 1 is teams that meet all 4 qualifications, or teams that are above the average of every category I looked at. Tier 3 is teams that meet 3 of the 4 averages or, qualifications. Tier 3 is 2 out of the 4, and then Tier 4 is 1 out of the 4 or 0 out of the 4. And I found out a couple of things that are interesting. So your Tier 1 contenders, teams that meet all 4 qualifications, they are above average in every statistical category of the past 15 champions. There's only 2 of them. They are both in the Western Conference, and they are not the Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. Instead, they are the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Houston Rockets. Denver does not have a good enough defense to meet all 4 qualifications, which, if you've been watching the NBA this season, you probably knew that. But very interesting to me, as most people will point out that, or, will think that the Nuggets are above the Rockets. That's a quote-unquote better team. They have a likelier chance of winning the championship. But, according to these 4 statistics, they don't. Found that interesting. Our Tier 2 contenders, so teams that meet 3 out of the 4 qualifications, are the Nuggets, the Knicks, and the Pistons. Again, very interesting. Leaves out a couple of names that, maybe preseason we were thinking should be in this conversation, but alas, they're not. Tier 3 contenders, so teams that only meet 2 out of the 4. We have the Spurs, the Celtics, and the Timberwolves. Very interesting place. The Spurs, if I'm correct, they missed out on the defensive rating, I believe, and the offensive rating. So, yeah, the Spurs have a good net rating, and they've won enough games, but their offense and their defensive rating, for some reason, are outside of the average. Very interesting to note. But I think some people might move the Spurs up into the Tier 2 conversation, especially considering the week that they've had. And now that they have Wemby back, things will be very interesting. And then again, we have the Celtics and Wolves stuck in this Tier 3 as well. I think that sounds about right. Probably the Celtics, I don't think, are quite a Tier 3 contending team, but they've had an excellent season, considering what the expectations were. And then our Tier 4 contenders. By the way, I picked like 10 to 11 teams that considering the start of the season and what we thought of them preseason, we are quote unquote possible contenders. So I don't know if there's any like teams that would quote unquote be surprises that I'm not mentioning here, but I picked teams that were thought of preseason as contenders, and given their start in the early season, have been considered like contenders. Hopefully that makes sense. But our tier 4 contenders, i.e. teams that I do not consider contenders at this moment, are the Lakers, the Cavs, and the Magic. The Lakers is the most interesting name here. If you pay attention to my YouTube channel, I just made a video about why I don't think the Lakers are contenders. But I think a lot of people, considering especially that they're the Lakers, LA glamour, they have Luka, they have LeBron. A lot of people consider them theoretical contenders, but they basically do not match any statistical performance of any past contender. So as of right now, I do not have them in that tier. The Cavs have been a wild disappointment to start this year. Been very, very up and down. They actually just lost to the Bulls tonight, which in my book seems like a death rattle. If I've ever heard one, they are struggling really, really hard, and they've got to figure something out here soon. And then the Magic. Magic had a very bad start to their season. They've kind of rounded things out as of late, but again, according to these statistics that I've picked out, they only meet, I think, one of the 4 statistics here, and that might be the defense. Yeah, their defense has really picked up as of late, but that's it. Their offense is outside of the top 6, net rating outside of the top 8, and they are not winning enough games. So this makes some very interesting things. Again, this differentiates the Spurs as not quite in the tier of like competitors or like top tier competitors, I would consider. This puts the Rockets over the Nuggets. Very interesting to think about. And then, we have the Knicks and Pistons in the East, and those are the only East teams that really receive any representation on this list. So again, very interesting to me. But I hope some of that made sense. Hope that was at least somewhat interesting. Again, I just wanted to get that information out there. I spent like an hour and a half researching that, and I thought it was all very fascinating. I'm hoping to build on this model moving forward. So maybe in a month or two, I'll give a little update on this, and we'll talk about it yet again. But until then, I don't think I have anything else to mention. Hopefully on the pod next week, me and Shaler will be able to take some time. I want to dive into college basketball again. We haven't talked about that in a while. And then there's a lot of interesting stuff leading up into Christmas this year. Christmas, quote unquote, the day that the NBA truly begins in many people's eyes. So we'll see how that goes. But if you made it this far and you are still listening, I appreciate you. I love you with every fiber of my being. Thank you so much for being here. Share this with your friends or people that you know, if you feel so inclined. If this is your first time listening, hi. Thank you for being here. Go ahead and subscribe, follow. There will be more of this to come. Follow me on YouTube. Do all of the things. I'm on Twitter as well. All of the links will be in the description below. And I appreciate you all for being here. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.